Well, that's a great segue. We've been talking about projection. Why don't we talk a little bit about LED and when that is right? When is that right for a project?
The great thing about LED is it is completely scalable to what your vision is. We have a lot of churches doing the kind of the traditional iMag where you've got the center screen, then you've got the two sides. I need a wider view on my camera here. Sorry. And we're seeing a lot of churches kind of go with just one very large screen and splitting that screen up with the right processor to house all the different bits of information that you need. So, just kind of like how we were on a Zoom call here and we've got the 4 windows, you could almost treat, say, like Michael's screen, you've got 17 foot tall, 60 foot wide. That's just a huge palette. You can do whatever you want to do with that. We can have backdrops. We can have multiple windows, different camera shots all on one thing instead of just treating it as a single source. One of the big things is you'll hear me preach this on just about every single conversation I have is content. Content is king. Content rules everything that you're doing. And I think content is probably one of the least considered aspects of doing any type of display project.
Yeah.
Everyone says, well, I want a big display. I want a huge thing. Awesome. What do you want to do with it? What do you want to have on there? How are you going to make your impact with that?
Yes.
We can put a 100-foot wall in there. It's fantastic. If you don't have the right content, there's no impact that's going to be made.
Well, I think that's a great point, Ted. And Michael, I mean, I've even seen since Central has put in that huge LED wall, they're not using it the same way when they first got it. They've totally kind of morphed into what they're doing today. They've probably gotten to improve now, but when you guys first got it, probably experimented with a few different things until you landed on like, this is what works. This is what's going to engage our people the most, right?
Well, and I think most of the time they're using it as 2 16:9 screens, one with iMag and one with graphics. That would be the majority. And then, we're using the full screen most of the time for sermon graphics.
Well, and that's it, and especially with that setup where you definitely have a contemporary service and a traditional service, the wall is going to be utilized probably different with each of those.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a more traditional service, you're not necessarily worried about camera shots. You're not worried, you're more worried about let's get the lyrics up on the wall for the fellowship to follow.
Well, and that was the reason for the moving screen too, is because we originally had 2 different types of services, a traditional and a more contemporary. The first service had a pretty large 80 to 100 person choir in a loft behind the stage. So we had to move that screen back and up. And then when we reset for the second service, we bring that screen down and forward.
Sure.
So there was definitely how much that thing weighs? The screen itself. Ted, you got a guess?
I would say 12,000. Would be a guess.
Pull up a calculator here.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Do some quick math for us. Come on.
So,
yeah, probably between 12 to 15,000.
That's a lot of weight.
That's just in the panels.
Just in the panels.
Yeah, so somewhere in that ballpark without.
That sounds about right.
And I would guess the structure is probably 10.
Oh
yeah. There's a lot of steel up there for sure to hold that.
Well, and electrical and moving cables, cable tracks, all that stuff had to be managed.
So the cool thing, I got a question here for you, Ted, but before I get into that, the cool thing that I've seen with the DirectView LED stuff is that, really it was an elite product for, people who had a lot of money. I mean, let's just be honest. It was the big churches that could pull this off. It was big stadiums, have them and used them. But the cost of these things have, in the last 5 to 10 years have dropped substantially to a point that they're not just for the big churches anymore. I mean, we're putting them in. I know, Michael, you've got a couple of projects going on that are mid-sized to small churches, and it's a tool now that we can actually use in a lot of different places.
It's definitely reachable now.
So,
sure.
If you would, Ted, on that note, give us just a general overview of what drives the cost of a direct view LED. What are the factors that make one more money versus less?
Sure.
And I'm not talking brand, but just across the board.
Yeah, something that's consistent with all LEDs. The first one really is going to be the biggest, most impact that you're going to have on your cost is the pitch of the wall. So let's talk about pitch real quick. Basically, you have a group of LEDs. You have something called a pitch, and what the pitch is, it's the distance between each of the LEDs. So
is that really the same thing as resolution? Can we call that the same thing?
No, but it plays into resolution.
Okay.
So resolution is going to be the number of pixels that you have. So if you have a wider space between each pixels, something with a higher pitch, you can have the same resolution as something with a lower pitch, but physically it's just going to be wider. It's going to be taller. It's going to take up more space. Mm-hmm. So a really good, I would say that, like when you guys come to me and ask for a quote, hey, one of the biggest questions I always have is, what's the viewing distance? Where's the first person who's looking at this wall going to be? If you have somebody that's going to walk right up to it, that's going to be 2-3 feet from it, that's a very different wall than someone that's going to be 30 feet from it. And if you think about most churches or schools, that first row of occupancy that you've got for the audience, probably going to be 20 to 30, sometimes 40 feet away from the actual display, especially when you're talking about a 16-foot display that's 20 feet up in the air, 15 feet up in the air. So something like a 4 millimeter pixel pitch is really, really effective for something in that distance. And the price on the 4 mil is very, very obtainable, especially when you're dealing with, some of the higher priced projectors. You're getting to a point where for a 16-foot wall, it's close to a wash. It's probably still a little bit more, but we're talking, help me out, Michael, maybe 10% more than.
Yeah, I would say so.
There. Yeah.
For a 4 mil.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, that's the measurement between the pixels.
Yeah.
Right.
4 millimeters,
yeah.
right.
So, so if you take a look at something like, so another really common one is going to be for like a live performance space is going to be a 2.5 millimeter. So obviously that's going to take those pixels. It's going to reduce the distance between the pixels. It's going to squish the pixels closer together. So if you took a look at something like let's take a look at just an HD signal, a 1920 by 1080 signal. You can achieve that with a 2.5 millimeter pixel pitch. You can achieve that with a 16-foot wall. 16-foot by 9-foot wall at a 2.5 will give you native 1080 by 1920 by 1080 in most products. It's a pretty good, or it'll be pretty darn close to that. If you go to a 4 mil, 3.9, a 4 mil, you're going to be closer to right around a 24-foot wall.
Okay, to get that same resolution.
Get that same, yeah.
Got it.
One thing to be clear on, though, is a viewing distance makes a huge impact on that. So if somebody says, well, so a tighter pitch is better, right? Yeah, it is in a lot of cases, but there is going to be a situation where you're 35, 40 feet away from it. You're not going to really be able to tell the difference between a 1.2 or say a 1.2 millimeter pixel pitch and a 4 millimeter pixel pitch, because everything blends together at some point. If you're 2 feet away from it, you'll absolutely see the difference between a 1.2 millimeter pitch and a 4 millimeter pitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me give us just a quick thing for our listeners. I always try to take the dumb approach. Maybe that's where I fit the best. I don't know. But for our listeners, if you ever go up, maybe you've got a projection system that you've seen in your house, or not in your house, but in your church or school or something like that, if you look at a projector and you walk right up to it and get right up close to the screen, no matter what resolution it is, at some point in time you're going to see lines instead of a complete image. You're literally going to see lines, and what they call it is lines of resolution. And as you back away from that image, you're not going to see those lines anymore. Your eye is not capable of picking that stuff up at a certain distance. Exactly. So the same thing is happening with LEDs. You're going to get up close to something, it's going to start looking blurry depending on what the pixel pitch is. And as you move back away from that, your eye will not be able to distinguish the difference. In projectors, TVs, now you don't see it as much in the TVs that you have at home now, but the TVs I had when I was younger, you could certainly get close to a TV and see those lines of resolution. So, and that's kind of the same thing we're talking about here. So I think what you're saying, Ted, is why would you buy a 1.2 millimeter display, spend twice as much money potentially on that display as a 4 or 5 mil when your closest person is 20, 30 feet away? It's not going to make a difference. Why spend the money, right?
Right. But if you have a LED display or an LED wall in your lobby and people are going to be walking up to it, that's going to be where you're going to really need that pixel pitch to be super tight, right?
Exactly. And again, it's when you start talking about the impact that you're going to have. So when I've had this conversation a lot where I've got businesses that want to do a splash in the lobby. They want to have kind of a wow factor. I want a 10-foot screen. When somebody walks into my lobby, they're amazed by it, and they get the quote, and they're like, "Well, this is more than I was looking at spending. Could we lower the pitch?" You could lower the pitch, and you could drastically decrease the price. But now, if we have a 4 millimeter pixel pitch LED wall that people are walking up to, they're 2 feet away from, it's going to look absolutely atrocious, and it's not going to make that impact that you're looking for. You would be much better going with a 2x2 LCD display wall. Get four 55-inch screens, or 3x3 9 55-inch screens. You'd make a better impact with that, because the what you're actually displaying on it would look better.
I was just remembering my first experience with a large display. I don't even remember where I was, but I got to tell old man story every once in a while. I was at some large gathering stadium down south somewhere. I don't remember where it was, but everyone remember the term Jumbotron.
Sure.
I remember my first Jumbotron. I was looking at it from, I'm guessing, the length of at least a football field, 300 or 400 feet away from this thing. And it was the most amazing thing I ever remember seeing in my life. That was 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But I decided, I'm going to see how close I can get to that thing. And I actually got right to the bottom of it and looked up. And what I saw looked like a 60-watt light bulb.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah, you couldn't see anything. You would
literally, the pixels were like the size of a 60-watt light bulb.
Yeah.
But from 400 feet away, the thing was amazing.
Yeah. Well, look at your, everybody has the billboards. You're driving on the freeway and you've got the billboards up there. They've come down in pitch, but a real, historically, a real typical pixel pitch for those is 20. 10, 20 millimeters.
Yeah. I think the best ones right now are right around 12. But
But the reality is you could go finer, but somebody driving 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour down the freeway is going to look at it. It's going to look okay. It all works because you've got that distance.
Right. So, well, you and I did a side by side that one time with a 2.5 and an existing 4 mil next to each other. And the client was looking at upgrading to the 2.5. And, we brought that in to kind of show like there's no difference in your first row of seating.
Right.
There's no point in spending the money on it.
Well, to an extent, something, I do think that you could always make an argument for the right situation going from a 4 mil up to a 2.5 mil, which is one of the reasons every time you guys ask for a 4 mil quote, I always give you a 2.5 mil quote as well, is because you still have content space. You still
have resolution there.
You still have the resolution. You still have the actual number of pixels. So, there is something to be said for
more detailed content, is going to lend itself to a smaller pitch.
That's a great point.
Yeah. If you're going to come to me and say, hey, we're really going to use this for, a lyric board, something like that. I always love going 2.5 for a lyric board because it's text, it's scrolling text, and, it just makes it sharper.
Right.
So
Right.
There's certainly, but I would never use, say, a 1.2 or a 1.5 millimeter pitch for a lyric board. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's to me, you could spend money elsewhere in the project. More.
So we always keep coming around to this, understanding the client needs. I mean, every one of these discussions ends at the same thing, and I got to put a plug in here because
go ahead.
And it's what we go way out of our way at Parkway to make sure we're doing. The last thing we want to have happen in anything that we're proposing to a client is at the end of that they're not getting something they're not happy with. So it's absolutely imperative that you're going through. We have all these different technologies to use. We have all these different, within those technologies, we have different products available, and narrowing that stuff down to make sure that client, when they make that purchase, because there's some, I'm sure we'll get into the installation side of this too, but there's a lot of time in putting an LED wall in, and we don't want to put one in and then have to take it back out again. So
exactly.
the time really needs to be spent on the forefront. Just, it's not like I want this, and this is it. You have to go through the time and talk to the client and the people that are involved to find out what the content is. What are you going to do with it? There's a lot of questions that have to be asked to make sure that what we're proposing you're going to be happy with, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Plug over.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And yeah, that's why we exist, right? Is to help kind of bridge that from the customer's needs, desires, vision to what product and how and installing and how you're going to get to that end result. That's why we exist. Well, one of the things I wanted to touch base on is, Todd, that you had mentioned is we have a project over in Saugatuck that you were that you're working on, which I think is some displays in the lobby for a performing arts center. And we haven't really touched on that a whole lot. And so I just wanted to see if we could make time for you guys to just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so actually that was an interesting project because we actually started off with the LED walls, and that project actually hasn't happened yet. That's another one that succumbed to the COVID-19 crisis and budgets, and it's a small community theater that we're working on, and they wanted to transform their lobby into a kind of a real artistic type draw type thing, and they wanted to do that with a lot of different display technologies, multiple displays, different places, just kind of draw people's attention, upcoming events, what's happening in the community, a lot of flexibility on what they're doing. So when I talked to Ted, I brought him in on that project, and we started with, I think it was 3 different LED walls that were in that space of different sizes, with different, giving them the ability with switchers and computers and different things to do different images on different things. And it quickly became very cost prohibitive because you could literally, these things were 4 or 5 foot off the floor, but literally right on the wall where you could stand up and touch the display.
Yeah.
Well, I think we were talking like 1.2 millimeter displays.
Yeah, we had 1.2,
which were just
1.5. Yeah.
Crazy expensive as to where they wanted to be. And there's a case where we actually decided to go with LCD panels and LED walls. So we looked at multiple displays, putting them together, and we actually created, I think, 4 different LED walls with LED different displays. And just so our listeners understand, creating an LED TV or whatever you want to call it, what is the proper term? I even struggle with it. Is it an LED wall or is it a LCD wall, or what do you call them?
Yeah, just like an LCD tiled wall.
Okay. So just so our listeners understand, you don't just go to Best Buy and buy a TV and start sticking them together. These walls are actually made to go together. And typically most of them, and the thing that changes the price in those walls is the size of the panel, and also the biggest thing is typically the size of the bezel, which is the black line that is around them, and they come in different widths. Typically the more expensive, the smaller the bezel, so you don't have a very large black line between. So just don't go down to Best Buy and buy a bunch of these and think you can.
Maybe that's a good.
Make them work.
Maybe that's a good point to talk about consumer versus commercial grade TVs in that application.
There is that as well. Yeah.
These video wall TVs tend to be designed to be run 24/7, whereas your consumer TVs are not.
Right.
And they're not made to really stand alone either, because they require special mounts, special brackets. Those bezels are so thin that these TVs get very flimsy.
You got to have a lot of adjustment on the mounts too, so you're not getting a mount from Best Buy. It's not the same type of mount that you would have for that.
Exactly.
I think it's worth noting too that if a customer goes ahead and buys, and we work with a lot of people on this, but if they buy a consumer grade TV and stick it in a commercial building, it does void the warranty. Yeah. So, information to know.
One of it is the control information. You know what I mean? So if you have, say, a Crestron system or something like that, the commercial TVs are going to have the ability to take incoming signals to turn them on, to run the content, things like that, which is one of the cool things that you can do with commercial TVs that you can't do with.
And again, we're not against using residential TVs.
Right.
We have clients that use them all the time. But it's just understanding the need.
Right. And understanding the difference, what you're going to get, right?
Exactly. I don't want to sell a church a TV that's going to hang in their lobby and just show upcoming events, if that thing's going to be on Sunday and Wednesday night.
Right.
I'm going to tell them, go down to Best Buy, pick a TV you like, and we'll hang it and put the program on it for you.
Right.
So we're not against it, but again, it's understanding the need.
A lot of times I recommend that, or I require that we provide the mount, and that they don't, so we can put in good professional grade mounts that are safe.
Yeah.
That is a huge thing too.
But the 24/7 is a big deal. You'll see that when you get into digital signage, or digital advertising, things like that, panels or TVs that are on for 24/7. A residential display is not going to last long. It's just not meant to be on all the time. So
let's talk about that in terms of kind of across the platforms that we have here, because the lifespan is a huge thing, and that kind of rolls into the cost of ownership. When you have, just like a light bulb that you have at home, when that light bulb is on, you're decreasing the life of that light bulb. The longer it's on, the less life it's going to have. And everything that we're talking about has a light source in it. Mm-hmm. And the longer it runs, the more it's going to run down. So when you take a look at even a commercial grade TV, they're going to, one of the biggest problems that I've run into with having a 2x2 or 3x3 commercial grade, 55-inch displays, is they look great when they go up. You're still going to have the bezels, but as those age, each of those panels is going to age a little differently.
Interesting.
So good subject.
Yeah,
you brought this up.
So what you have is on day one, you look at it and say, "Hey, we saved X amount of money by going with we got 3x3." So we have 9 55-inch displays. It's a 138-inch display. It looks beautiful. It's in our lobby. Everything's fantastic. And it's showing one image. On day one, that could be great. The second year, you're going to start seeing each of those panels aging at a little bit different rate. And, usually by the end of that third year, beginning of the third year, it's going to be really, really noticeable. We've all seen, video walls that, is an amalgamation of multiple TVs together where they all look a little bit different. Look at airports. Every single airport that you go into, you can see a bank of LED, LCD TVs, and they all look a little bit different. And when you're trying to make a single display canvas, it's really difficult to do that when you start seeing different patterns, different age awares on that.
So what is the general lifespan of a TV? Just for our listeners.
2 to 3 years before, if you have now that's the thing. If it's a single TV display in a lobby, as that ages, you're not going to notice it as much because you're referencing it to itself.
Right.
Mhm.
But when you have multiple ones put together, that's when you're really going to start noticing them.
I've heard 8 to 10,000 hours on a. Is that close on a LCD or
residential?
LED TV?
Probably
Yeah.
somewhere around there. A lot of it is the brightness that you run it at too. A lot of those numbers are I can run this at like 0 brightness and it's going to last these huge amount of time. And projection is the exact same way. When you have a bulb and a projector, the longer it runs, the dimmer it goes. Everyone, if everyone's dealt with a projector, when you swap the bulb out, it's like, whoa, it's like I got a brand new projector here because it's brighter than it was, before I swapped the bulb out.
So
Right.
let me jump in on that a minute. I'm glad you brought that up. So there's a real difference between the lifespan on a bulb projector typically. Now, don't hold me to these exactly because they vary from manufacturer, but typically you're looking at a manufacturer on the spec sheet would typically say 3,000 to 4,000 hours. Okay, on a lamp projector, the laser projectors are now saying typically you'll see something in the 20,000 hours for a laser projector. But it's important to understand something about those. Those aren't. Some of those are linear and some of them are not. So if you buy a lamp projector and you looked at the curve on a graph as to the output over time,
Yes.
at somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 hours, that lamp has lost a very large percentage of its brightness. So it drops very quickly and then it flattens off for, say, if they say 4,000 hours. So the problem is even though with a lamp projector, it says it lasts 4,000 hours. The last 2,000 hours are pretty poor.
Yeah, it's like that 40% or something.
The first
like
2,000 hours
Right.
are pretty good, but
Right.
after that, it drops very quickly.
Yeah.
On a laser projector, it's linear. So you could draw a direct line from brightness to time. It drops gradually over its lifetime. Okay. So on that note, Ted, talk to us about direct view LED. What happens with that?
This is certainly one of the great things about direct-to-view LED is, they don't actually, it's so long, they don't actually know. If that's a horrible answer to people.
We'll have the data in about 20 years.
Yeah, it's literally what it is. It's somewhere between 100 to 200,000 hours of 100% brightness going forward. And it's usually 100% brightness right around a little over 100,000 hours is what they're estimating it will be to be at 50% brightness. So if you run it at 100% full on with a white background, so it's everything, it's as bright as humanly possible. You run that for 100,000 hours. It's going to be a little over 100,000 hours before that becomes, it's like the half-life.
What's the typical brightness on most of your projects?
That's the interesting portion of it. So when we do, I think just about every project that we've done together, we're usually running the LED wall. It's so efficient that we're running it usually at 50% brightness to begin with, which means after 100,000 hours, you could crank that brightness up to 100 and you'd still be at that level. So one of the cool things with, when you have like a commercial, grade TV, say in a lobby or something, you're probably not going to be happy with the performance of the signage 2 to 3 years into it. You're going to start seeing some blotchiness where you're going to have to swap those TVs out. So when you take a look at kind of the cost of ownership with some of those projects, it's not just the upfront cost, it's the how long do I intend for this display to serve me? And, if I, okay, great, I'll upgrade the TVs. Well, that's still, they're paying someone to come in and make sure the new TVs are hung right. It's not just the cost of the new material. It's the additional cost of the installation, the replacement cost of the installation, I guess is a better way of putting it. So that all, plays into it as well. So, I'm not certainly an expert on projection. I can't imagine that if you had to swap out a laser projector, if you had to swap out the element, I can't imagine it's super difficult. Is it? I've never done it.
I don't think you do.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys got a count. I think you throw it away and you buy a new one.
You buy a new one.
So
it's pretty much
that would be one of those
laser projectors.
If we are running the projector, say 6 hours a week, you should be pretty happy with the life of
Sure.
the projector. If you're running that projector 24 hours a day, 20,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, there should be a cycle of depreciation for equipment on a building, you know, and that's generally between 7 to 10 years.
Yep.
You know.
Well, and on technology.
On technology.
Yeah, when you're going to want to do something different, no matter what you have. You know, I know that the when laser projectors came out, they were substantially more money per lumen than what a lamp was, but they are so close right now.
Yeah,
I think if you had to buy one lamp in most cases, buy one lamp for a lamp projector, after that 2,000 hours, you already have into what you would have for a laser for, you know, something you won't have to replace until you want to replace your technology typically. So
yeah, I mean, every 1 to 2 years, I'd be replacing.
I'm just amazed
lamps.
when people ask me for lamp projectors anymore. I don't know why. It makes no sense.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about technology is things keep getting better, and there's better choices. You know, I mean, look at any project that you guys are working on today versus if you were asked to do the same thing 10 years ago. How different the products would be. I mean, we live in an awfully good time right now.
Yeah, you know, the first projector I ever sold, I still remember it, was a 3-gun CRT. People probably don't know what the heck that is, but it was the size of a Volkswagen. It had a red, green, and red, green, and blue lamp, basically output, and you had to converge it on a screen. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was $30,000, and it was 800 lumens.
Oh my goodness!
That was $30,000 in 1955.
It was a little later than that, buddy.
Okay. All right.
Not much, but a little bit later. So comparatively today, that projector, you could buy a small LCD 800. I don't even think they make them as small.
I don't even think you can buy it that small.
I think the smallest is about 1,500 lumens. Does 10 times the resolution and cost.
Now you can hold that in your pocket basically as a portable.
I know, you could hold it in one hand and
size of a hard drive.
Yeah. So and that's the neat thing too is as technology goes together. I mean, none of this stuff is getting more expensive. It's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for the technology that you're getting. So next year, there'll be a time. When I started selling LED walls, when I started doing this, 2013. People were still doing a lot of, we were still doing 6 mil for indoor stuff. I run into a lot of churches that have the old 7.2 millimeter because they got it, 5-6 years ago. And that was the price point that was great. The people that had the 4 mils back then were spending huge dollars. Now 4 mil is really, really typical. It's tremendously affordable. I mean, I think retail on a 2-foot by 13.5 inch panel on what I sell, the retail on it is $949.
Yeah.
So it's
right.
Tremendously, like the cost is it goes down every single year. But if you wanted a panel that was 6 mil indoor, I don't think I could get one for you now. I'm sure somebody has old backstock, but it's not, people won't even make them anymore because it's just, there's no reason to. You can, the sweet spot is a lot lower now. So in next year, probably 2 years, how we look at 6 mil now, that's what 4 mil will be. And 2.5 will be kind of the standard that everyone will go with. But it doesn't make 4 mil not work for your space anymore. Absolutely not. If you got a 4 mil wall right now, 2-3 years down the road, if you want to, do something different, easily repurpose that wall somewhere else. You've got panels. You can reconstruct a wall in a youth room. You could reconstruct a wall in an alternative worship space.
Could use it for scenic design.
Absolutely. Set design is a huge thing.
Oh yeah.
We do a lot of stuff where people have a huge projector that they have, but they start adding LED panels for set design, and they've got them on standing truss, and you're using it as just set pieces that you can.
So Michael, or Ted, either or both, Christian, 16 by 9. That's 16 foot by 9 foot, 4 mil installed. I know there's a lot of variables to that, but give our listeners a number. What are we looking at about?
Are we talking? Well, one of the things that we didn't bring up is infrastructure. So if you don't have to put in the infrastructure, so say like you don't have enough power, we were talking about having an old building, right? Say an old church that's been around. Are we talking just for the display?
Yeah, just the display.
Okay.
Just on a wall, on a flat wall, not with a lot of building steel. We're able to mount it fixed.
We're mounting it. It's not moving. Yeah. Right.
I mean, off the cuff.
What are we looking?
What? Just for our listeners to give them a general idea what they're looking at for something like that.
Well, I've gotten into trouble for sending out numbers. So,
Ted, you want to take a stab at it? Michael don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look up the one that I just sold and see how much that was.
All right.
That's great. Well, one of the things that we can talk about as Michael's looking that up is, it might be a good idea to go with a projector because you don't have the infrastructure or to support how much power you're going to need for an LED wall, or the budget, really. The budget to actually bring in that infrastructure and to have an electrician come in and redo your electrical in order to be able to support an LED wall. So you have to think about those costs as well when you're putting these things in or installing or planning.
That's a huge thing, actually. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Todd.
No, I was just going to jump while Michael's looking too for that whole price thing. There's a lot of factors that obviously go into considerations. You spent great information, Ted, about cost of ownership and how long that LED wall is going to be able to be used.
Right.
Something you're not going to do with an LCD, wall, TV wall, or a projector. You're not going to get anywhere near that kind of use. But even if you break it down even farther, because a lot of churches say, "Well, we're not all that fancy. We don't need an LED wall in our church. We just do song words." But the thing of it is, a lot of even you don't have to be a big contemporary church to be able to doing stuff. Small churches are putting up banners.
Sure.
And there's a cost to creating that stuff. They're changing the look of their stage a little bit by hanging some banners up, doing some different things, some different looks. Well, once you have an LED wall on the backdrop of your chancellor stage, now it's a computer. You can create anything you want, and the cost of doing that is the time for somebody sitting in front of a computer making it.
Sure. And
again, versus creating hard. There's a lot of things you can do with that. So there's more to that than just the cost of the actual what you're buying. You have to look at other things you're doing and how you can transition that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk. Yeah. So you guys mentioned a couple things. There's a lot to unpack there. So one of the things that you talked about was what's the infrastructure needed for an LED wall, or any of the things that we're talking about. The first thing is, how are we going to put something up? So, if we're going to do a projector, where's the projector going to go? Do you have a facility, the layout of the room, do you have the ability to easily place a projector where it needs to go? If we need to put some different lenses on there to compensate for where the location of that has to go, what does that do to the cost? What does that do to the light output? That's a huge thing. Do we have the actual structure to suspend a screen from? I mean, a screen, an 18-foot screen weighs, it's not, there's some substantial weight to it, to a good screen. That's certainly it. You're going to have to get the data from, if you're feeding a projector up to the projector. So if you've got a room that has 50-foot ceilings, we're going to have some type of a drop for a projector. Are you okay with that? Does that work within the lines of the architectural vision that the fellowship has for that room? If we're talking with an LED, direct view LED wall, the three typical ways that we'll put those in, if it's a small enough, like for a conference room, we can still do those on stands, like a roller stand, so you can move it from room to room. The other way would be to directly mount it right to the wall. And the third way would be to suspend it from a truss. There's the way that the LED panels snap together. There's a hang bar that goes across the top, and they would all snap into that. Sorry.
I was going to say, what is your preference? I know that we've talked about this in the past, but what do you feel like is the best option if you had a choice?
This is going to seem like I'm dodging the question, but it really depends on the room. I always appreciate having access to the back of the panel. 100%. So if all things were equal and they could say you could do whatever you wanted to do, I would much rather suspend it from the ceiling. But that doesn't make wall-mounted solutions. It does not in any way mean that they're bad.
Right.
The way that the panels work is you're going to have feeds of power going to the wall, and you're going to have feeds of data. Once they hit the data and the power hit a panel, you'll daisy chain between the panels. Depending on the size of the wall, depends on how many direct feeds you're going to have and how much daisy chaining you're going to have. If you're going to push that up against a wall, we have to now run that cable inside the cabinets to go between each one. So if you think about something up against a wall, there's no places to plug things in. So you have to run it in, and then the jumpers will all happen internally inside the cabinets. If you're suspending it, and you can get, to the front, you can get to the back, you have access to, say a jumper cable goes bad, you have access to just walk up, get a ladder, swap it out.
Can you pull a panel? Can you pull a panel away from the wall once it's installed? A single panel out of a wall?
So what you do is, we didn't really get into the actual dissection of a direct view LED, but what you have is you have the frame. Inside that frame, you have and the frame is basically the housing of everything. That's what would be snapped into the mount to the wall. Inside that frame, you're going to have a power source, and you're going to have what's called a receiving card. The receiving card takes the data in and puts it out to the actual LEDs. The final piece is what's called a module. And a module is the front panel. That's what actually has the LEDs in it. And that with magnets, that would just snap right into place. So if you had it up against a wall and you needed to change a power supply, you would go to that panel. A magnetic tool would let you pop those modules, the LED modules off, and then you've got access to everything inside that panel. So if you needed to adjust the cable, if you needed to change the power supply, you could do that fairly easy.
That's great. But did we end up finding a price, Michael?
I did. So a 2.5 mil that we just installed was $79,000.
$79,000. How big was it?
That was a 16 foot by 9, 2.5 millimeter.
5 mil.
All the data runs, rigging, wall mounted, installed was $79,000.
That includes installation, everything out the door.
Everything.
And I would think that same wall in a 3.9 mil would probably be 50, 45.
Yeah.
I was going to say $15,000 less, somewhere in that ballpark. And that's the thing. Installation, literally, if you get a 2.5 mil or a 4 mil, the installation
is the same.
Is exactly the same. The only difference that you would have is you would have more data runs, because you'll have more pixels, so the resolution would be higher on a 2.5.
Got it.
You may have a couple more circuits as well.
A couple more circuits, but usually they're all about the same. So Christian, you mentioned, like forever ago, you mentioned the actual infrastructure needed for an LED wall. So we're going to need to do, we the first thing I would do is we do a site visit. We'd look at the space. Do we have a wall that we can hang it on? Nope, we don't want to do it on a wall. We want to suspend it. Okay, great. We'd take a look at what structure we have above the stage to see what we could hold it on. Each panel is about 17 pounds. So, you take a look at a 64, 8 panels by 8 panels, which would give you a 16-foot by 9-foot wall at 17 pounds each. It's a decent amount of weight, but it's not that much. So we could suspend that, but there's certainly situations where we don't have the ability to suspend it from a ceiling. The other thing we could do is we could do like a ground support.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different options for that. And what I mean by that is we would have a frame that the actual wall would be placed on, and it would be suspended from the ground up. So instead of going from the ceiling down, it would go from the floor up.
So with the 16-foot by 9-foot LED wall, how much power are we talking?
So with most LED panels, a good rule of thumb that I kind of go by is you can do 10 panels on a single 110 circuit. You can do about 21 panels on a 208 circuit.
Okay.
So it really depends, and that's an ideal situation. So it kind of depends on the layout, because when you have to sort of snake everything, depending on the size of the wall, sometimes it's just easier to add an additional circuit than to kind of come up with some crazy configuration stuff. So like on a 64 panel wall, if you had 208s, we could do that with 4 or 5 208 circuits, but we would need 910 amp circuits. And so that is absolutely something to think about when we have the cost of the infrastructure. Do you have the ability to tap? Hopefully you guys know a good electrical company that would be.
We could do it all, baby.
I think we can find one.
Yeah.
But that is one of the great things about Parkway is you have to do the data runs. You have to do you're probably going to have to do some electrical work. It's great that you guys are kind of a one-stop shop for all that.
Absolutely.
Sounds like another plug there, Todd.
Absolutely. Yeah, Todd, more plugs. But hey guys, any final thoughts on display technology that you'd want our listeners to know about as we wrap up?
I would just reiterate the fact that there's multiple technologies. It's not a one size fit all. It just takes time of working through this, understanding what you're doing, how you want to do it, what your content is, as Ted says, what you have available as far as a budget, and taking all those considerations and coming in with the right solution. And the beauty of it, I just love the fact that direct view LED is an option that we can offer most everybody now. That is, that's a game changer.
It is.
That we didn't
very
have,
reachable.
Did not have 5-6 years ago, right? It just was not an option. So that's a cool thing.
Absolutely. Well, Ted, I just want to thank you for joining us today, man. It's been a pleasure having you. I can't wait for this mandate to kind of be lifted so that we can just go get some Indian food together, man.
There's certainly a ton more. I mean, one of the neat things with all of these technologies, just to kind of wrap it up, is it's good to have a guide through the entire process. If one of the technologies was dominant, then you wouldn't see all the other ones. And the reality is it's not. It all depends on the situation that what you're trying, like we talked about, what's the environment? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we doing here? What's our budget? All of those factors have a huge play in which one is going to be the best, for the application that you have. And, if one technology had it figured out, everybody else would be in trouble. And that's just not the case. So the best thing to do is to be able to have a resource like Parkway for you guys to look at the space, to listen to the customer, to understand what their needs are. And I mean, I think even when's the last time you did a projection quote for a client that didn't involve a direct view LED quote? It's all going to be kind of part of the process. And it's certainly, like Todd said, it's certainly reachable. And it's continuing to be more and more reachable for all the projects.
Well, I sure have enjoyed your help, Ted. You've been a valuable resource for Parkway.
Absolutely.
With your knowledge and product knowledge base. And we look forward to working with you on other stuff.
Sure.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Ted.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.